video, we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first of all, we're going to talk about the conversation between the President of the United States of America and the President of Zelensky. So yesterday there was a call between them, and according to information we have, they were talking about air defense. Zelensky in conversation with Trump, we discussed air defense capabilities and agreed that we will work to increase air defense. We agreed on a corresponding meeting of our teams. Later, we got additional details about the call. Call lasted around 40 minutes, and President Trump spoke to Ukraine President Zelensky this morning. A source familiar said it was a good conversation. So very interesting two words, good conversation. So what is happening right now? I would like to remind you that according to information we have, the Russians are about to begin bombing and attacking the territory of Ukraine with hundreds of drones a day. So just yesterday, if you remember, the Russians used more than 500 drones to attack the city of Kiev. A lot of explosions and casualties were recorded. And Zelensky in Ukraine understands that if Russia continues bombing and attacking Ukraine the same way, obviously they will not be able to do anything with the Russian Federation, and it's going to be just a matter of time when Ukraine will be forced to capitulate and, most important, to lose everything, not just Ukraine but Zelensky himself personally. So that is why Zelensky needs to find a solution how to stabilize the situation, and the only possible solution, is to get air defense systems from the United States of America. And we need to understand that both Putin and Trump understand this. So the only way for Ukraine to stabilize the situation, so there are two options: either to capitulate, to surrender, or to get air defense systems from the United States of America. And the source who's familiar with the situation stated that Donald Trump talked to Zelensky not just about air defense system. Basically, Trump issued an ultimatum to Zelensky, but not his personal U.S. Personal ultimatum. This is ultimatum from Putin that was handed over to Zelensky. Donald Trump is in a conversation with Zelensky, gave the latter an ultimatum: American aid in exchange for compromise on the memorandum presented by Moscow. According to Ukrainian resources, Zelensky promised Trump that the third round of negotiations with Russia in Istanbul will take place in July. So, Zelensky believes that Russia needs this negotiation process. For example, we got very interesting statement made by Peskov, the press secretary of Putin. Yesterday, Vladimir Putin told Trump that achieving Russia's goals of war in Ukrainian negotiations does not yet seem possible. So Russia doesn't need negotiations in July because they don't believe that this process can lead to lasted peace or something like this. And the question is, what kind of compromises Zelensky can allow himself, let's say, regarding Russian memorandum. I would like to remind you that several weeks ago, the Russians provided their own memorandum about the peaceful settlement of the conflict in Ukraine, and there were several paragraphs, important paragraphs. First of all, to withdraw positions, to withdraw Ukrainian troops from Kherson region, from the Zaporozhye region, from Donetsk region, and from Lugansk region. But obviously, Zelensky will never accept this. This is not kind of compromise he can allow himself. And another thing that the Russians can accept probably at this stage of negotiation process is the president elections. And we believe that Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America, promised Zelensky additional air defense systems as many as he needs, in exchange for president elections. This is a very important question, and the main reason why do we think like this is that currently during the next 10 days, Zelensky will have to make very important decision regarding regarding martial law and regarding mobilization. Either he is going to extend martial law for another 90 days in mobilization as well, or he will stop this process, and this will launch the president elections mechanism. So, and this situation, this question will be resolved during the next 10 days. So that is why we can see this pressure from the United States of America and the Russian Federation, and both the Russians and the Americans are trying to force Zelensky to stop a martial law. But obviously, if Zelensky does it, he will lose his president chair and he will be forced to go from Kiev and probably to fly to London or to Paris or whatever he likes or something like this. And we believe that Zelensky will never accept this, which means that the Russians will continue doing what are they doing right now. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. We have lots of very interesting updates. And first let's talk about the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region. The Ukrainians during the previous 12 hours attacked the settlement of Shebekina, and in these photos we can see a lot of huge fire that the Ukrainians managed to create as a result of missile or drone attack. Most likely the Ukrainians attacked some military facilities or some concentration of Russian forces, because I would like to remind you that currently the Russians are trying to attack this northeastern part of the Kharkiv Oblast with the purpose to establish complete control over this territory. From the other side, the Russians attacked the settlement of Chuguev, and in these pictures, in these photos, we can see the consequences of Russian attack. The sources familiar with the situation reported that the Russians, as a result of this attack, managed to destroy a oil depot, fuel depot in the territory of Chuguev. The fuel was destroyed, and these fuels the Ukrainians were planning to use to supply and support their forces exactly in the northeastern part of the Kharkiv Oblast. And this is exactly the area where the Russians 2 days ago launched their major offensive operation. And I would like to remind you that during the previous few days, the Russians managed to secure the village of Milova and to take under control these two huge forest belts to the south and the west of the settlement. Furthermore, today several mappers adjusted their maps, giving us additional information about the progress on the ground. So this is the situation by the end of the 4th of July of 2025, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 5th of July. Additional tree lines, additional tree belts, forest belts were taken by the Russians. The Ukrainians are in panic about this offensive operation because Ukrainians came to conclusion that the target of the armored force of the Russian Federation is to establish complete control over this small, let's say, a concentration of villages in the vicinity of the settlement and the settlement itself by the name of Velyki Burluk. So this is a primary target for the Russians according to Ukrainian sources. Ukrainians understand that if the Russians are able to establish complete control over this huge settlement, first of all, this will allow the Russians to continue concentration of their forces in this area, and from the other side, the Russians will be able to establish complete control over the northeastern part of the Kharkiv Oblast, because from the village of Velyki Burluk, the distance between this, let's say, settlement and Pechenyogi Reservoir is less than 40 kilometers, and obviously the Ukrainians would lose any possibilities to use, let's say, roads in this area to supply and support their contingent in the area of the city of Volchansk. And don't forget that currently the Russians are attacking Ukrainian positions to the west of the city of Volchansk, probably with the purpose to improve their positions and to cut Ukrainian possibilities to use, let's say, this area for logistic for the armored forces of Ukraine in the northeastern part of the Kharkiv Oblast. So this is the plan of the Russians. Let's wait and see what is going to be next, but we believe that the Russian offensive will just intensify. And Velyki Burluk and this northeastern part of the Kharkiv Oblast is not a primary target. Obviously, it's a part of a huge plan, of a bigger plan to establish complete control over the city by the name of Kupiansk, where as a result of previous 24 hours, the Russians carry out several aviation attacks, and as a result of these attacks, as you can see, several temporal deployment points of the armored force of Ukraine were destroyed. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Donbas area. Today we got additional changes on the ground in the Siever's direction. The Ukrainian sources published this video, and in this video we can see how Ukrainians were bombing and attacking Russians in different sides of the Sivers direction, and there are lots of episodes in this 1 minute video. And according to information we have, according to geolocations, one of the attacks took place exactly in this point. Based on this video, we have adjusted these tree line and these small forest belts under complete Russian control. So we see that the Russians are maintaining their lines, trying to shorten the distances and trying to cut this pocket completely. This is a part of the battle for the settlement of Serebryanka. At the same time, the Russians control the main supply lines and roads in this area with the purpose to ruin Ukrainian logistic completely. So the battle for the Siversk is ongoing. Now let's discuss the situation in the Konstantinovka direction. During the previous 24 hours, we got just one video from the area of the southern micro-districts of the city of Chasiv. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in different parts of the city of Chasiv. There are lots of episodes, as you can see, and one of the episodes was geolocated. Lots of strikes, lots of episodes, and one of the attacks took place in the micro district by the name of Cech number 2. So this building, most likely an area to the east of this building, is already under complete Russian control. So when talking about this configuration of the city of Chasiv, there is just one block, one micro district left for Ukrainians. And we are talking about the Zemlyanki micro district, which is less than 2% of the city of Chasiv itself. We expect that during the next 10 days, the city of Chasiv would be taken by the Russian completely. Or maybe the Ukrainians would carry out several counterattacks with huge losses, which will allow them to stabilize the situation for another week or two. But something tells me that we are not going to see this. Most likely the Russians are about to finish the battle for the city. I would like to remind you that yesterday the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that the settlement of Pritekyino was secured by the Russians. The most important village and the distance between, for example, the city of Konstantinovka, first buildings, and the village of Pritekyino is already less than 3 kilometers. And there are no more barriers between these two settlements. So the Russians anytime soon can carry out another offensive operation and basically to answer the city of Konstantinovka. The situation for the Ukrainians in this area remains tense, and telling the truth, I'm not even sure what exactly the Ukrainians are going to do next. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk agglomeration. We have lots of very interesting statements. Several Ukrainian very reliable and very famous soldiers on the ground published very interesting articles regarding the situation in this area. Pokrovsk is threatened with operational encirclement if we don't find infantry. That was stated by the fighter of the armored force of Ukraine called Sign Muchnoy. If we don't find infantry now to close this area, we can prepare for operational encirclement of large cities, starting from Mirnograd and in turn to Pokrovsk, write the military man. So, and he wrote this due to the critical situation in the eastern flank where the Russians continue their offensive operation. And as you can see, during the previous night, we got small changes in the area of the settlement of Koptiva. This video was published by the Ukrainian side. In this video, we could see how Russian soldier was fighting with Ukrainians in close combat distance under very heavy fire of Ukrainian FPV drones. So this episode took place exactly in this area. Based on this episode, we have adjusted the territory to the northwest of this village of Koptiva. So the Russians continue their offensive operation. As for the South Donetsk direction and the Dnipropetrovsk direction, today the Russians managed to destroy the bridge in this area finally. So this is the only bridge through the river Volcha that Ukrainians could use to supply their contingent in this pocket. Now the bridge is completely destroyed, as you can see. During the previous several days, the Russians carried out first attack. The bridge was just damaged, and now we see that after 3 days attacks, the Russians managed to destroy bridge completely. Ukrainians have no chances for evacuation and normal logistic in this area, as well as the Russians, because they're using pontoon bridges to cross the river of Mokry Yaly. But anytime the Russians continue offensive. And as you can see, during the previous 12 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the village of Pidubne. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 4th of July of 2025. According to Ukrainian sources, the Russians secured around 50% of the settlement. Today, several neutral mappers clarified the situation and colored additional streets under complete Russian control. So it seems that the battle for Pidubna is coming to an end. Furthermore, the sources continue reporting that the Russians entered the village of Tolstoy as well. At the same time, the Russians continue their offensive in the direction of Voskresenka. According to the group of forces east, there are 3 armies of the armed force of the Russian Federation who are advancing in 3 different directions: the village of Voskresenka, the village of Pidubna, and in the territory between these settlements. So there are very heavy clashes, but we see that the Russians are about to establish complete control over every single settlement in this pocket. As for the Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 12 hours, we haven't received anything. The Russians managed to secure almost completely the settlement of Kamenska. The only thing we have is that the Russians continue bombing and attacking the positions of Ukrainian FPV drone operators along the river of Dnipro. In this video, we can see how Russians using drones were attacking the temporary deployment points of FPV drone operators of the armed forces of Ukraine. That's were counterattacking Russians during the Russian Kamenska offensive operation. So as for now, we are waiting as well for additional updates, whether the Russians establish complete control over this territory or they continue their offensive. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.